was a very dirty subject. I'd write pieces about it and people would say, but aren't you scared? Don't you think the police are going to put your name on some list? And so that was really why I kept writing about it, because nobody else did. And then I got sort of particularly interested in the history of drugs, because there's this kind of assumption that, well, drugs just sort of appeared in the 60s with hippies, but actually you start to look at it and 100 years ago you could walk into a high street chemist's and you could buy cannabis and cocaine and morphine and heroin and everything. So there's a whole story there that's been forgotten, so I started writing about that.
From your research, is the experience of being high an artistic or scientific phenomenon?
This is one of the reasons that I find the subject so rewarding and kept going back to it, is there are so many different ways of looking at it, and it covers so many disciplines, and there are so many approaches and ways into it. Because part of the story is a scientific story, because these are chemicals, how do they work in the brain and all that. And there's also, associated with that, there's a big medical story, because all these drugs, even things that we don't think of as drugs now, like tobacco and tea and coffee, when they first appeared they were medicines. So all these drugs have a medicinal story. There are lots of other cultures where drugs are used very differently, and they're much more widely accepted in society, and they have different roles. With the exhibition, it's been great because we can roam across all these different perspectives.
So what's the main thing that you hope people will take away from this exhibition?
In our culture, drugs are always a big issue and a hot topic. Drugs. We hear about them all the time, but nobody ever really explains what they are and where they come from and why people take them and how they found their way into our culture, and why some of them but not others were made illegal. So I hope people will get a bigger perspective on the story. They'll be able to look at the way that drugs are in our culture with the perspective of different cultures around the world, and with different times in history and different ways in which humans have engaged with drugs.